All right, everybody, happy Thursday, and welcome into the FingerLakes1 Betting Preview for Week 2 of the season. Paul Russo here, Kyle Evans here as well, Jim Sinicropi off today, but don't worry, we have his picks. We'll be able to hit him up for his, and we will jump right on in here feet first. Kyle, happy Thursday, almost to the weekend. We'll get to your picks here in a second, but how do you personally feel after Week 1, now that it's in the books?
One word, rough.
Okay.
My picks didn't go well. My team didn't win. Rough first week, but many weeks to go, and I'm learning as I go on. Like I said in the first show, I don't really bet as much, but I'm going to start this year, and I'm kind of the rookie of betting. So hopefully I can turn it around and get on track.
Yeah, mine was average. NFL Week 1's always kind of tough, right? And we can talk about this maybe for a second, but I always view it as a little bit of a definitely a notebook building process. We kind of talked about it a little bit last week, so we don't have to spend too much time on it, but maybe we will. We'll obviously take a look back at Week 1 here in a second as well. Talk about a little bit of a topic for the week that Kyle, me and you actually discussed a little bit off air, a little bit about player props, and then we'll give our picks for the week, all that. But first, we have to thank our sponsor for today, Cicino's Pizzeria and Restaurant. Visit Cicino's Pizzeria and Restaurant at their original Waterloo location, all-new, renovated location in Geneva, or at the Del Lago Resort and Casino. Dine-in, takeout, delivery, catering, and banquets. Order online at Cicinos.com. Live, laugh, and eat well. It's the Italian way. So, Kyle, I think we'll jump here right on in to last week's pick. Let's put them up on the board here. And we'll begin with Jim's. Him and myself had a mirror week, even though we didn't have the exact same picks. Nothing wrong with that. But me and him mirrored each other. So a brief recap, right? We begin with 10 units, as we call it. We're calling our bank $100. $10 is a unit. So everybody only laid one unit last week on each of their picks. Myself and Jim both came out technically in the black. We broke even for the week. We both missed on 2 picks while hitting 2 picks. Jim with Miami of Ohio -7 over UMass, and Houston and Baltimore under 44 points were his hits. The Colts losing, and the Giants also losing, not covering either of those were his losses for me. I had to bite the bullet a little bit. Alabama, not to go too far down that road, but I am disappointed in Nick Saban a little bit. And the Panthers were my losses, while Oregon, just by the skin of their teeth, more or less, and the Jaguars were my hits. Kyle, though, you were not off to a great start Thursday night. Admittedly, looked like the ship might have been turning a little bit with the Titans on Sunday, but the Bills on Monday night, not quite as much. So, Kyle, you are minus going into Week 2 here. The only one who took it in the red last week. You're currently at 9 units, while myself and Jim are back at 10. So, not bad overall for Week 1. I know you called it rough, but those will happen from time to time. And the way I view it, better early on than late.
Yeah, and the thing about that was, at one point it looked like the Chiefs, if they just held on defensively late, my bet would have hit, and it just didn't work out that way. And like you said, it happens, and hopefully what I have for Week 2 will kind of get me back on track.
Yeah, so you talk about Week 2. We'll obviously get to that here in a few moments, but I do want to talk a couple minutes here, like I mentioned, a little bit about kind of Week 1 and how we should view things. Obviously, the bulk of our discussion tends to be NFL, right, and that's fair and justifiable. But we do have a little bit of a conversation about college football. That's where I tend to make a couple picks usually every week, not to give too much away for my picks, but there is one college game on my slate this week. And obviously their notebook a little bit bigger at this point, right? But, not even close to being complete, and likewise with the NFL. So, in your opinion, Kyle, can we really take anything from Week 1 exactly and kind of roll it into this week? Or, if there's not, how do you view Week 2 from a terms of, say, a pick or betting process?
Yeah, I don't really take too much into or take away too much from week one. Just because, like we saw what the Bengals did, they got blown out in Cleveland, and Joe Burrow had under 100 passing yards. We know moving forward that's not going to be the case. And the Bills, Josh Allen turning the ball over 4 times, we know he's going to improve, and we know the Bills aren't going to be, terrible like they looked on Monday night against the Jets. So there's just those couple games right there that kind of just show, like, yeah, week one sometimes isn't always it for certain teams. They get off to a rough start, but usually they turn it around. And even last year, I was listening to, I forgot what, it's called the Extra Point Podcast. It's like a Bills podcast. And they brought up a good point this morning. Week one last year, remember how many touchdowns Carson Wentz threw? And how good he looked in the first week? And then all of a sudden it shifted? That just shows, like, what happens in week one usually sometimes doesn't hold up. I'm not going to really factor in week one as much. And obviously matchups are different too. The Raiders' defense for the Bills is not even close to the Jets' defense. So, yeah, I don't really follow week one as close for my picks.
So I will present a bit of a potential counterpoint because I, much like you, don't put as much weight, but I do think you can pick up on some things. And I think, to be fair, you bring up a good matchup, for example, with the Bengals and the Browns from last week. Now, do I think the Bengals are actually that bad? No. But it does have me worried that Burrow didn't look great, and I know there was some weather and stuff like that, but, when a guy, for example, like T. Higgins does not have a catch, I think he was targeted only a couple times as well, but when guys like your number 2 receiver struggle, like that can be pretty telling. Now, I will agree with you here, though. When it comes to matchups, this week is more, I think, of the indicative side of things of how you could probably expect things to kind of go throughout the year. For example, Vegas and Buffalo this weekend. And you bring a good point, right? Buffalo, frankly, didn't look good, right, in week one collectively overall. But if you listen to Bills Weekly, another podcast here on FingerLakes1.com, we talk about a little bit how, like, this is a get-right game for the Bills kind of this week in a sense, right? So I do, for example, like that matchup this week overall against Vegas enough to bet. Probably not. And, to be fair, that's one of the games I am keeping an eye on as we get closer to Sunday. It's just not quite on my radar just yet. Now, I will say this. That line has come down a point in terms of spread since we talked about that game specifically on Bills Weekly on Tuesday, when that game opened up as a 9.5-point game. Now it's down to 8.5. So if that game were to get closer to a touchdown, maybe that really intrigues me, for especially on the Buffalo side of things. But for now, not quite there. But it is a tantalizing over-under at 46.5 right now, for example. And, Kyle, you bring up a good point, right? That Raiders defense, and this is where that matchup thing can come into play. We know Raiders defense, kind of outside Max Crosby, not going to light the world on fire the way that Jets defense did, for example.
Yeah, I did some research on that game. I actually do have a pick for that, but obviously we'll get into that a little later. But one of the, I would say, crazier stats that I found, 37 of Josh Allen's 53 career regular season wins have been by 7 or more points. Yeah. That's kind of wild to me. 37 of 53 have been at least by 7 points or more. So it seems like when the Bills win, they win big. And that's how I actually think this game is going to go.
Not to steal your stat, because you were the one who brought it to my attention anyway, but Josh Allen does not have a win in overtime yet in his career either. So it's kind of telling. It's kind of telling you bring that up, right? And that's one of the things that you can start to build off of week 2, in my opinion, right, is the trends kind of in a way, right, where, one game, or really to be fair too, right, 1 or 2 games could just be a fluke type deal, but this is when, especially early on in the season, this is when you build that notebook, you build the information to kind of move forward and make the right decisions moving forward throughout the season. Let's talk a little bit about some player props and how we kind of navigate those. I thought it was an interesting discussion we kind of had off air a little bit about, so I figured we kind of would bring it to air here a little bit. Player props are always an interesting space for me personally, betting-wise. I tend to admittedly rely kind of, I wouldn't say heavy on them, but they certainly, outside of football, make up the bulk majority of my bets in a lot of other sports. Baseball, I use the example. I love using the pitcher props area. This year has been a little bit interesting with the pitch clock. It's kind of changed the way I approach things a little bit with pitchers. But there's always, to me, like values to be had in player prop areas. To go back to the well here a little bit, Kyle, go back to something you brought up, right? Matchups are always indicative, right? Again, to use the baseball example, and it kind of sounds crazy maybe saying it this year, but like if you have a game, let's go for an example here of one that's going on right now. We're recording in the Nationals and the Pirates. You know, Pirates pitcher, and I'm just going to use him as an example, even though I know he's not pitching right now. Mitch Keller, right? He may have an over/under of 5.5 strikeouts against the Nationals. Well, that can be all fine and well, and that's certainly a potential good spot, right? In theory, a strikeout an inning is certainly possible for a guy, but that may not be a good bet because, well, the Nationals are, I believe, I don't know their exact space, but I do know that they are one of the least strikeout-heavy lineups in the league. So that may not be a great bet, and that's what makes player props so interesting and fascinating for me, is because you can really look in, and especially if you're a numbers guy. This is where those numbers and trends really, too, seem to pop up. So, Kyle, I'll turn it over to you. I wouldn't say you're exactly like me, but when we were talking off air, you were talking a little bit about how you enjoy the player prop space as well and kind of what you're able to do in it.
Yeah, so I'll go and get right into it for tonight. I actually put together one, and I did use a bonus bet on it. But yeah, so I'll start off here. Here's something I don't think a lot of people are thinking about tonight. The Eagles are without James Bradbury and Reed Blankenship, so like their defense is not as strong as it was last week in terms of the personnel that they're going to have tonight. And the Vikings are a good passing offense team. Obviously, last week they struggled with the run, and they just succeeded on the pass. Kirk Cousins had 344 yards. So with that being said, tonight I picked the over on his passing yards, which is 229.5. And then I paired that with Jalen Hurts passing yards over 199.5. And then Vikings wide receiver Jordan Addison over 29.5. And then I did 2 anytime touchdown scores. And I picked A.J. Brown because he didn't have one last week. In week 1, Devontae Smith did, so I figured tonight's the night he gets his first. And then Justin Jefferson. So it's a 5-leg parlay. It's a $25 bonus bet to pay $143. And it's plus 575. So I just felt like what I picked there have a pretty good chance at hitting, especially the passing yards. I do like the passing yards. I think the Eagles' defense is going to still be good tonight, but it's going to be a little weaker and allow those Vikings receivers to get open. And say they, double team Justin Jefferson at times. That's going to leave a guy like Jordan Addison, who did have 80 yards last week.
Yep.
So I don't see why he couldn't hit 30 at least.
Yeah, I know we're obviously this is the betting podcast portion of our stuff here, but yeah, the Addison on the bench one really pained me in fantasy last week. So
yeah,
that'll happen from time to time.
Maybe if anything, the anytime touchdown scores hurt me, but let's be real, AJ Brown's a good player and could easily find the end zone, and Justin Jefferson's Kirk Cousins' main target. So I don't see it's not crazy to pick that.
No,
but again, it's a bonus bet too, so why not?
Exactly. Yeah, you bring up a good point right there with the bonus bets. Something that we didn't mention last week and really wasn't on docket here, but just as a reminder, no matter what book you're on, there's always usually some sort of boost going on right now or something like that. Just be smart about how you use them, right? There's always usually minimums or like in the same game parlay space or any parlay space, for example, you usually have to meet a minimum line to reach. Just be smart about it, right? Don't put yourself in a spot that frankly, you're just kind of doomed to lose type scenario.
Yeah, I received 8 bonus bets, and I needed to use them by tonight.
Yeah.
So I just figured, why not? Yeah. So I threw that one together. I'll see what happens. It'd be pretty cool to win it.
Nothing wrong with that in the slightest. So you mentioned a couple guys right there. It's interesting, too. I wanted to, for our picks today, and this is something I think we can transition over to when we get to really discussing our picks here in just a couple of minutes. It's kind of tough early on because sometimes they just don't have, say, your anytime TD scores or something like that. I know I was really hoping to get Nick Chubb here kind of early on for an anytime touchdown score, but they just don't have those lines quite out yet on certain books. And it's interesting, too, because Nick Chubb was a guy that I did have a little side action going on, not in our pick space, but, outside as an anytime touchdown scorer last week, and ran for over 100 yards and did not have a touchdown. And that's one of those things where, you bring up a good point, Kyle. You talk about A.J. Brown in that space. Sometimes stuff like that just happens, right? And, but that's part of betting. You don't know. You never know the risk, you never know exactly the risk, what might be being took or anything like that. So, it always interesting there. So, I think with that being said, I think it might be time to make our picks for the week, Kyle. You ready to go with those?
Yeah.
You want me to do Jim's first and then we turn over? Okay,
Do
so Jim, as I mentioned, not here, but we do have his picks. Much like me last week, broke even 2 for 2, so he's able to get 2 of those units back that he lost, bringing it back to an even 10 for him. He has 3 picks this week, all with 1 unit each. He's going, as I call it, back to the well, but it's one of my favorite wells to go with. He is going Eastern Michigan at home, -7 against the UMass Minutemen. I really do love this pick because me and Jim seeing the same, as I call it, sicko light in the mid-majors in this situation, even though it's not quite the case. UMass awfully, awfully bad collectively here. And I know what some people might be thinking. They did get a win early on against New Mexico State. Take that with a huge grain of salt. So I'm with Jim on that pick, 110%, even though it's not on my picks, but great pick in my mind by Jim there. Another great pick here. I kind of mentioned it a little bit about this game. Vegas and the Bills over 46.5. He has as his pick there. And his last pick of the 3, Miami and New England over 47. So a couple overs and a college pick for Jim. Those are his 3 picks for the week. Kyle, turn it over to you. I know you were struggling a little bit this morning, but by the time we got to this game, by the time we got to going live here, you seemed pretty confident with your pick. So I'm intrigued to see where you went.
Yeah, so I did go -8.5 with the Bills.
Okay.
I did predict on Bills Weekly 30-21, so I do think that's going to hit. And like I said, I think Josh Allen bounces back in a big way. And then I have tonight, I took the Eagles -6.5.
Okay.
And then I did a 3-pick one again. My last one is Broncos -3.5.
Oh,
Yep. I'm sorry, Paul. I'm feeling it.
so you bring up a couple games in there, though, line-wise, that I do want to talk about here, just on my end personally for a minute. And we did talk about this a little bit last week, right? And I know Jim did specifically about maybe having some other action happen elsewhere and maybe waiting a little bit on these picks. And you bring up 2 games that I did want to wait on. I'm honestly hoping that a couple more people kind of bet on the Broncos because I do want to bet on my Commanders this week. It's an interesting spot there, but the Bills, the way that line's already moved a little bit, I'd love nothing more than we have, mind you, we're live and recording here Thursday afternoon. I'd love nothing more in the pretty much 2 whole days, borderline 3 whole days up to game time and kickoff Sunday afternoon for that line to come down to like a nice 7 spot, a true touchdown, and that gives me enough of that wiggle room. But even if it got down to 8 by game day, a flat 8, I probably would still roll the Bills. It's just not quite on my radar just yet to jump on board with.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel at least by 10, honestly.
I do love your picks though this week. I think you're on the right end of thinking, in my opinion, anyway.
So you do have you do agree with the Eagles pick then tonight?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I don't think Vikings. I think the Vikings will be in it in the first half, and then it'll kind of.
The tough part with that is I think it's going to be a shootout, but I mean, it's just going to be, I feel like, a touchdown parade type deal. So I think you're in a good spot.
Please let A.J. Brown find the end zone and Justin Jefferson.
Hey, I'm with you there, Kyle. As long as I have Hurts in fantasy, again, to go back to that for a quick second. So as long as Hurts is doing his thing and maybe let Devonta Smith have a couple passes here and there, I'm all right with that.
And a bounce back for Dallas Goedert. Did you see how bad he was?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And Hurts was held to 170 passing yards.
Yeesh.
So that's why I picked over 199 tonight.
That's true.
Should hit.
All right, my picks. I'm about to let you down, Kyle. Maybe even Jim. I only have 2 games this week. Nothing at the moment was fully jumping out at me. College-wise, it's an interesting week. There are a lot of interesting games that I'm going to have to do the sitting and waiting on game a little bit with a couple of them. But at the moment, I have 1 college and 1 NFL game. My college game is LSU minus 9.5 on the road against Mississippi State. I think this is a very good LSU team. I think this is a Mississippi State team that's been kind of fighting above their weight a little bit so far this year, but I kind of like that spot for LSU. And then another road game here in the NFL that I'm taking the Giants minus 4.5 at Arizona. I think the Giants need to bounce back in a big way, and I just don't think Arizona's all that good. So, and
I like that.
Frankly, the only reason why that game jumps out is because it's kind of like the Bills' mindset. I think a little bit with what you're kind of leaning a little way, but with the Giants, they also have nowhere to go, kind of but up in a way, especially the Giants. And if I'm wrong on that one, I'll just have to take it and whatever. But that's kind of my thing there. And I only have, like I said, those are my only 2 like solid locks of the week type thing. I feel like in this betting space, like I said, I think a lot of stuff this week. Now everybody to each your own, right? That everybody we talked about last week, right? Everybody has their own philosophy. My mantra this week is I'm gonna sit and get as close to game time as I can, or just be really monitoring the lines. And if I get a spot where I feel more comfortable with it, then yeah, I'm gonna jump on it. And not to spill too much tea here, so I do apologize, Jim, if I go too far. But me and Jim are in a similar spot. I really did want to take the 49ers, and I know he kind of wanted to take the 49ers, but I think they're just at the line spot right now, spread-wise. I think it's at 7.5, and it's like, for me, I'd love to get to that flat 7, but I really want to get below 7 for me to feel really confident and comfortable in it. But alas, I mean, that's just the way it is right now, and it's why you have to always watch your lines, and always, don't be afraid to have multiple books ready to go potentially. Everybody has something different sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that will do it. We have our picks in. So recap again quickly. Jim taking Eastern Michigan minus 7. The Raiders, Bills over 46.5. The Patriots and Dolphins over 47. I'm doing the LSU Tigers minus 9.5 and the Giants minus 4.5. And Kyle, you're going with the Bills minus 8.5, Eagles minus 6.5, and Broncos minus 3.5. So those are our picks of the week. Kyle, good luck to you. I'm assuming you'll have a similar setup going, that awesome setup as you did this past weekend, I'm assuming, for Sunday?
Yep, 7 TVs set up. Red Zone on the 65 and the Bills on the 6. Wait a minute.
Oh.
Remember, I don't get CBS.
That's right. You're in
the
a
Bills game
spot.
only comes on Red Zone when
Yeah.
when they're. Wow, man, that's
Tough spot for you this
TV.
week.
Come on, guys. But yeah, it'll be a great setup.
If Disney and Spectrum could get together.
Yeah. But yeah, good setup. Can't wait. Some exciting games to watch.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good stuff. Yeah, I'll be. I don't have Red Zone this week. My buddies are out of town that I watch with, so I'll be with the Bills game, or I don't know who's got that early window Fox game technically here. So, alas, it is what it is. So, Kyle, good luck to you. Jim, good luck to you, and everybody else, good luck to you. As always, appreciate everybody for tuning in here on FingerLakes1.com. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. All the fun stuff to help us help you out. So, good luck, everybody. Hopefully you're in the green, and hopefully we are in the green, and we'll find out together next Thursday. Again, good luck, everybody. We'll talk with everybody next week.